Harvey Elliott, Matty. He seems to have this a bit of a bromance really with Salah. You saw them together when there was waiting for him to see if VAR would get his goal. He's done really well this season so far in different positions in the midfield on that right hand side, a bit more attacking. Do you think at this stage we are putting maybe a bit too much pressure on him to perform, given some of the disappointing performances so far by some of the front three in midfield so far this season?
Yeah, because I don't think Harvey Elliott's as good as people make him out to be honest.
Whoa! Hold up a second. No,
he's a good player. No, he's a good player, but people are thinking he's going to be some generational talent, and he's not. He really isn't. Like he's a very, very, very good player, and he definitely deserves to be starting and stuff at the moment. But he's not. People seem to think that Harvey Elliott's going to be the answer to all of our problems, and he's not. He really isn't. Like when he plays, yeah, he has some phenomenal moments. He has some good moments, but then he also has some painfully bad moments. And he is still a kid. And I feel like the best example on how to nurture a kid into the first team is like what Pep's done with Phil Foden. So 3 years ago, everyone was saying to Pep, "You need to be starting Foden every week. You need to be doing this," and he didn't. And now Phil Foden is starting every week and is world class. You need to nurture the minutes more, really. Like with Harvey Elliott, it just seems like we're relying too much on some kid. He'll end up getting burnt out and not living up to the potential, which he probably could achieve. We need to manage his minutes more. And yeah, he was great against Rangers. Yeah, he's had some great games this season. He's had some poor games as well. But I don't think that instantly, I don't think he starts on Sunday. He should be nowhere near the start 11 on Sunday because you need to manage his minutes more, to be honest with you. And Harvey Elliott will only be as good as Liverpool want him to be. And by putting all this pressure on him, starting him all the time, he's not going to get to that. Like genuinely, the master plan to get the best out of Harvey Elliott is doing like what Pep done with Phil Foden. Because look how good Phil Foden is when everyone has been saying for years Phil Foden should be starting week in, week out for City, and he never has. It's about finding his best position, nurturing into each position. And with Salah, I like that. Salah's very close with Curtis Jones as well. And I like that he's taking these youngsters under his wing and nurturing them and stuff because he's a model professional, really. Mo Salah looks after himself. And if he's taking the likes of Elliott and Jones and Carvalho and stuff under his wing, it's only going to benefit them in the longevities of their career. But I wouldn't put all this pressure on Harvey Elliott because everyone seems to think he's some world-class generational talent, and I don't think he is, to be honest. I'm more excited about Fabio Carvalho than Harvey Elliott, I'll be truthful.
Wow, that is it's seemingly agreed by quite a few members of the chat. Anthony commenting saying he needs to stop playing in his average. Evidently, we've got some agreement. I do think he's a phenomenal player, and yes, he hasn't played that well in certain games, but he's also really stood out. I do think Matty makes a really good point, Kev, about it's about managing the minutes, isn't it? It's about playing them in the right games at the right time and not burning them out. We talked about when Trent first, we've talked about a few times when Trent first came in, it was very much the same. There was a lot of pressure to throw on him, especially when he started having a couple of good games. And even when he started playing poorly, I remember there was a game against United that he early on that he got ripped to shreds. Trent. So it's about playing them in the right games and making sure you don't burn them out too quickly. It's a very, very good point to make. Are you in agreement with myself and Matty and that, Kev?
Absolutely. I'm also in agreement that last night was probably Harvey Elliott's best game for Liverpool this season. Playing a little bit higher up, not having the defensive mentality that's been expected on him. He's done all right in those positions, but he's done, for me, as I've mentioned before, and the stat came out the day after to prove it, is that he is good on the eye in that position. He'll look for the ball out and he'll look to play the ball forward. However, defensively, he is not of that mindset, and he's not willing. His tackling isn't up to what you'd expect for someone who's playing in that position. That's not against the lad himself. That's just he's been put in it's basically a round hole in a square with a square peg. We're trying to adapt him and to try and bring his game on a bit. But I think he played higher last night. He relished the actual opportunity, as he always does every time he comes in, and he gives 100%. It's too early to be saying what he's going to be expecting or what his potential is going to be. But we need to, as Matty said, nurture it to the point where I totally agree. He doesn't start for me. He comes off on the bench if we need him to. But I wouldn't be starting him. I think that's the position he played last night. That's where we should be focusing and relying on him to be playing and learning off the likes of Salah and also Bobby as well to start looking at how to create his that type of his game even further than what it is. If he starts creating more, then his potential goes up even higher. So at the minute, he's not at his ceiling, but the sky's the limit as to where he wants to go. But that's only down to, as Matty said, answer yourself. That's down to playing him in the right position and focusing and bringing players around him who can evolve him even more than what he already is. Being around Mo will evolve him, and it's certainly around Bobby Firmino as well. Because then he'll start getting the tactical side of his technical ability better as well. But no, I agree. He needs, same with Carvalho. I hate to be on here now because I'm agreeing with what Matt's saying, but I was at the start of the season happy made up at seeing Fabio playing and seeing what we can do with him. He's found it difficult at times, and he grew in the game last night, which was good. Instead of bringing him off at half time, we kept with him, and he grew in the game and got his confidence up. And he needed that. But no, I'm quite happy with who we've got at the minute. But Harvey doesn't start for me. He needs to be playing in that higher up position for me.
Yeah. I'm going to put this question to both Matty and Kev, but with Harvey Elliott, with Carvalho, do you think the switch in formation has benefited them higher up the pitch in the midfield? Where do you see him in the long term ending up?
If he improves his defensive abilities, then he could play in a central midfield role. But based off what he is now, I do think the new formation will benefit Carvalho and Elliott, because more so Carvalho, he was a 10 at Fulham. So in this new 4-2-3-1, I mean, people say 4-4-2, but I do think it'll benefit them. More so Carvalho, because he can play in that 10. I think he'll be exciting behind Darwin Núñez. I mean, that doesn't mean I want Bobby to go, which we'll go on to later. But same with Elliott, I think he'll be really good in the 10 as well. However, when Salah came on last night and Elliott did drop into that right side of the front four, that's when I felt he was playing his best football for us last night, when Salah came on up top. So I think Elliott needs to improve his defensive ability. I can see him being more of a central midfielder long term if he improves his defensive ability, because I don't think he's got the pace to be a winger for us, really. And maybe a 10 would be perfect for him. But then, like I said before, I've got more hopes for Carvalho, and I think I just see something in him that reminds me a little bit like Coutinho. So I feel like I don't want Carvalho's minutes to be hampered. So if both of them are going to get rotated in the 10, then that's exciting. But I do think Klopp probably sees Elliott more as a central midfielder. But I do think that he needs to improve his defensive ability if he wants to be a central midfielder, even though you could argue the position he plays, if he's got two pivots behind him, he doesn't need to defend much. I just want my central midfielders to be able to do everything. I don't know if that's because I grew up with Steven Gerrard, who could do everything, but you don't want a central midfielder who can't throw a tackle in. Like, central midfield wins you the games, and at the minute, Elliott can't really put a foot in, and that's the only thing that worries me. And he is probably a bit too slow to be a right winger as well. So probably the 10. In answer to your question, I'd see Elliott more as a 10, but then I see Carvalho as a 10, so it's a bit interesting.
Yeah, it certainly is to try and fit these guys in. Kev, I would say, are you in agreement? But I feel like you're going to agree based on how this stream so far has gone.
I hate to be, but honestly, there's nothing I can be negative about. Unfortunately, it's exactly what my mindset. Exactly. Do you know what I mean? But the problem I've got with Elliott at the minute in midfield is he's not, and it backs up what Matty said. He's not dominant in that position at the minute. He looks very tentative and is very very naive in his position and where and what he's doing in the game. For me, that personally comes out in his defensive mindset and how he tackle. I'll bring it up again. The Palace game, where Eze gets through, that press that he puts on is just ridiculous. And I was fuming after that game. I was annoyed that he was allowed to get through as easy as he did. There'll be other examples that you could use. It's not having a go at him. It's just if Klopp does see it in there, then he needs to get to be more dominant in there and be able to make those tackles, as Matty said. Carvalho just excites me. I think he could play anywhere across that front three, behind Nunes for me. And he's more adaptable and there's more to his game that you could utilise, even if we had injuries with certain players. For me, at the minute, Carvalho needs to build on his confidence, because at the minute, it looks a bit, during the Everton game, it looked as though it broke him starting the game. But that's not saying that it's anything on him. It's just the fact that he's come into a better team than where he was at. And we're asking questions of him that we wouldn't really be asking of a young player this early on in his career. But due to the way we are at the minute and lack of numbers, we are relying on certain players to set up. He played well second half last night, Carvalho, and we saw what could be potentially where he should be. But as I say, I see Carvalho more as